Hey, everybody. It's the latest edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Everybody always asks me, how'd you get that job on the wrestling podcastages? Well, people don't know this, but when I was a youth, a strapping young buck, I was a member of the ring crew locally here in Jersey. I used to help set up the rings, and my job was set up the ring post. It's really easy. I happen to have a ring post right here, as you can plainly see, and I'm going to show you the proper way to set it up. Now, all you got to do is take the bottom of the thing. My shin! It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour! The only ring that guy knows is around the bathtub. Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's Bob Smith, the former Pro Wrestling Illustrated managing editor who used to be managed by Craig Peters, the editor-in-chief at that very same magazine and family of magazines. And on this special edition of our Outdated Wrestling Hour, we're going to take a look back and let you sit along with us as we show you how we put every issue of every magazine together from the start to the finish, the problems we encountered, the fun we had, the troubles we had, all of it in one big stew. And we think you'll find it interesting. We think you'll find it funny. And we hope you'll stick around for the length of this longer than usual show. But enough of my yakking. Let's get along and listen to the sounds of the great Craig Peters. We're already laughing our asses off, folks. Hi. This is Bob Smith, your outdated host on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. And as you know far too well by now, the former writer with Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And guess who's back? By popular demand, one and only Craig Peters, the former editor-in-chief of PWI and all your favorite wrestling magazines. Craig, it's good to see you.
It's good to be here. One of your listeners, Jerry Popular, demanded that I come back for a second episode, and here we are.
The oldest joke in the book.
It sure is. And we have two oldest jokes in the book here doing this
right
podcast.
Here, yes.
But we are going to do something on this podcast. So this is one of many wrestling podcasts out there, and I have been on a few other wrestling podcasts over the last couple of years. And if you are a fan of old school wrestling magazines, this is the episode for you. We are going to dive under the hood of the wrestling magazines in a way that no one anywhere on any podcast has ever done. So how's that for a tease?
Tremendous. I can't wait to dive into it.
We'll see you next time. It's been great.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
See you next time on the
shortest episode ever.
OWH. We're gonna make t-shirts say OWH, and they're gonna have stains on them, pre-stained for your convenience.
So I have
We're
to
in one
say,
of those moods, guys. I'm sorry.
It is. It's a Monday afternoon, and it's one of those Mondays, and we won't talk about. We won't even talk about that, but we will talk about this. I appreciate being called back for a second episode here. It was a lot of fun the first time. I know it'll be a lot of fun this time. Please refer to previous teas for about that. But since the last episode, I just want to say I don't get a chance to watch a lot of wrestling or wrestling documentaries on TV. Particularly this month, I've went to quite a few concerts and been keeping busy going out.
Few,
yeah. Well, we're connected on social media, and you saw Springsteen.
Craig here says he saw Springsteen.
Yes,
I think he has a cubicle on Springsteen's bus at this point. You have been to more Springsteen concerts than I've had hot dinners, my friend. It's amazing.
By Springsteen fan standards, not that many, but I'm closing in on 40. So I saw him for the 38th time a couple of weeks ago. Then we saw Little Feat the other day, it was great. We had front row, sitting about 10 feet away from Bill Payne,
there you go,
who's still got it. Saw Stephen Van Zandt and the Disciples of Soul in Red Bank, New Jersey. So yeah, so it's been a busy month, but I did get a chance because I saw a lot of talk on social media about the A&E uh, episode about Dusty Rhodes, and it really was. It was a terrific, terrific episode of A&E biography, and it felt like it dovetailed really well with this podcast. I mean, we talked about it before we went on air. Watching some of these old clips of Dusty coming up and just the atmosphere of what those TV shows were like, and even the fact that he won the belt with a small package. When was the last time that happened?
Oh my gosh!
Probably when Dusty did it.
Yeah, or one of the Rick Steamboat matches, maybe against Flair. Yeah, and what is that?
So
late '80s, early '90s at the newest.
Yeah, exactly. So what, like 30 years? Does anybody even do a small package anymore?
I think I see them try them in some WWE matches, but it's always in minute 3. Right. Oh, goes for an early win. One of those, and then they never try it again.
So, but yeah, it was a great episode, and yeah, I mean, I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't know before, but that's not unusual for me when I watch these shows. But yeah, it was very good, so I would recommend it.
Okay, I want you folks to know that both Craig and I are armed with bells today, a la Steve Allen.
Yes, we are.
Okay, now
mine's a little flat.
We're going to be quizzing each other. Here's my first quiz: would a guy like Dusty Rhodes make it today? Yes or no?
That's interesting. Well, that was, I think, the real interesting part of that show to me was, there was Dusty Rhodes and then there was Polka Dot Dusty Rhodes.
Right.
And would Dusty make it today? Well, yeah, but Polka Dot Dusty might.
Polka Dot Dusty was Diet Dusty Rhodes. That wasn't Dusty Rhodes.
But yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He didn't have any of the flavor of the gritty, soulish, funky Dusty Rhodes of the NWA. He just didn't.
Yeah, and that's what this show really brought out. I mean, you really got an appreciation for him, his skill on the mic, the reason why he resonated with crowds as much as he did. I don't think he could make it today.
All right.
We could go down a political rabbit hole, but
no. Here's my answer to that. Kevin Owens.
Okay.
Not the greatest of shape, but he made it. Now, he doesn't have the gift of gab that Dusty, but he does in a different kind of a way. So I liken Kevin Owens to Dusty Rhodes in that regard. Like,
interesting.
He'll never be a bodybuilding, and he wrestles in a full-length T-shirt with an armless T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he showed his entire physique, people would go, "Ooh, Blubber Ben" or something like that.
Right.
I think that if you have the strong enough overall charisma, you can make it in wrestling still. I mean, you can look at Mick Foley like that too, in a way. He wasn't a big muscle man. He gained fame in the height of the muscle era. So I say, yeah, Dusty would have made it.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Okay, that's my thinking on that.
Raises an interesting question, though. If you look at any star from the old days, the good old days, it's really two questions. Could they make it today? Or is there someone today who's doing in today's context what that star did in yesterday's context? I think you gave a good example of that, but you could go down the list like Luthez.
No, you can't. No, you can't. There is no Luthez today. Nobody would accept mat wrestling today. Nobody.
Right.
Nobody's going to book it. Nobody's going to watch it.
So that just wipes out a whole category of.
Well, who wouldn't probably make it today is Bob Backlund.
Would not make it today, you said?
No.
Okay.
No, but that's not. They would turn him into Chad Gable. What Chad Gable is now, a character. Huge. You ever see that guy?
I have not.
Another formerly great collegiate wrestler who is now a character. Now,
that's a good question. So
he still wrestles with sort of a collegiate style. You can tell he knows his mat wrestling, but he had to be modified into a comedy character in order to make him palatable for today's audiences, or so they think.
Now, are there other collegiate wrestlers that do mat wrestling today? I mean, I don't watch a whole lot, so I apologize for my ignorance on
who
that.
knows? They don't bring up anything like that anymore.
Right.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if Braun Breaker, which is Rick Steiner's son, I don't know if he was a collegiate wrestler, and I probably was. He looks the type.
Yeah.
But I don't know that for sure. Why? They never bring it up.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter if you.
That wouldn't be a selling point. Can you imagine that? Being an Olympic wrestler would not be, or a collegiate champion would not be a selling point today at all. At all. Only in the cases of Ronda Rousey does her past come up, or someone like that, someone who was big in UFC or something like that, or maybe Logan Paul. I hate to say, just
UFC background or
right, but background is something else that's contemporary. But I think that the WWE thinks that collegiate wrestling is boring and therefore doesn't push it.
Alrighty then.
Could you imagine if they did that? Here comes a collegiate champion, and he comes and stretches all the pros, and then wins the championship. Like he beats them all in 35 seconds. Right. Bunch of quick pinfalls, and
tie him up.
Main events of WrestleMania would be 29 seconds, and you're a winner. Yeah. So I don't think it would work. It's a
fans would be sitting in the stands going, "What the hell? What was that? What did I just see?"
Yeah.
Well, this sort of feeds into what we were also talking about before we started the episode here, which is, the TV shows of yesteryear, like the wrestlers themselves, were not did not have the type of production values that they have today. So it might be one camera on a ring, or maybe two if it was a big budget production. But now there's all this technology, and the wrestlers these days try and top each other. High spot has to beat a high spot. Violence has to be more than before. Everything's got to be bigger and better and faster and higher and all the rest of it. And the technology really facilitates that, right? It happens in the same way with technology. So I'm just wondering, like, how much of what wrestling has become is the result of technology versus fans becoming numb to what was last year and the year before. That was a horribly phrased way of putting the question, but
not too bad. No, I get it. It's a tough one to answer. I do think that you said it the last time you were on the podcast. Up, 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 up. We have something new to play with. Up, up, up. Oh, this guy can leap off the ring and go 20 feet higher in the end than the top of the ring. Up, up, up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Everything.
Now it's the top of the cage. Then it's the top, off the ladder on top of the cage.
That'll be top of the building next week. It's like everything has to advance higher, bigger, stronger. Never saw that before. I think you make a point with that in your comment there, because it's like, if they have the technology, they're certainly going to exploit it. I'm sure.
Well, and in a low tech world, and by low tech, I'm meaning TV production, right? In a low tech world, sort of the comparison of the skills of the person in the ring, in other words, the skills are going to shine through more in low tech versus when there's high tech and lots of flash and lots of dazzle, lots of production value. The athlete has to have more of that, him or herself, to shine through all the production value and reach the audience. 50 years ago, you didn't have to fight through all that production value. Whoever the wrestler's personality was could just come through.
Right.
I mean, if you took Bruno's personality and put it in today's production value setting, what would happen?
That's a good question. Or would he be swallowed up by it?
Right.
I mean, remember the one time that Bruno teamed with Hulk Hogan? Did that look right to you? It didn't look right to me. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It seemed unseemly. It didn't. It felt like, I know it was an old champ and a new champ in the same tag team match, but just thinking about it doesn't sound right.
It was one of those things that sounded much better on paper than in reality.
Speaking of things that have advanced, and not in a good way, is the forced humor attempts of WWE. Every time they try to be funny, it's just embarrassing. Whereas if you go back to the pre-technology days, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Friendly Bob Freed at Madison Square Garden, the original ring announcer there in the early 70s.
I do not.
I actually did a parody of him on the beginning of one of my recent shows here. Because Bob Freed would mispronounce my name, Bob Smith. he mispronounced half of what he talked about, yet he had a job for 15 years. And not only in New York, he went from New York to Washington to Baltimore, wherever they were promoting. Friendly Bob Freed was your ring announcer. And he's still, you could still see him on some early MSG clips on the WWE.
Did he ever do anything alongside Howie Finkel?
No, Bob just disappeared from the scene. I don't know what happened. He was Friendly Bob. I went to John on John Rizzi's podcast. I said to John, I said, Bob Freed would mispronounce my name. And John said, yeah, but he was friendly.
Right.
Which is the funniest thing John's ever said. So it's pretty good.
That's like the Ed Sullivan School of Broadcasting. Right? Like, people used to talk about Ed Sullivan and say, yeah, nice guy, but he could count to 3 and get 2 of the numbers wrong.
Yeah, but he'd always have a flower in the lapel, ill-fitting sport coat, and he'd go,
right
here on our next card, the main event, one fall, we're finished. The Malton Giant Barone, the Skip Fluner, it just, no matter what he would pronounce, it was dead wrong. Antonio Ponga Glazin, he would literally stutter in the ring. How he had kept the job for so long, I don't know. That was funnier than anything they can come up with now.
Have you ever mispronounced something that you knew was pronounced differently, but did so in a very public way?
In other words, what?
Have you ever completely embarrassed yourself publicly by mispronouncing something?
Every day.
Unintentional. Well, I mean,
Not, listen,
broadcasting.
Someone I know, he drives me crazy, right? Very intimately, who pronounces it, what is it? Not,
Chipotle?
Yeah, he pronounces it Chipotle.
Chipotle.
And every time he does it, my head goes, it's like, can you not know it's Chipotle? It's like.
When I was in college, I had a job working at a commercial radio station off campus, upstate New York, WCHN. AM and FM, Norwich, New York. It was great. It was like WKRP before they switched over to rock and roll. We would play, Carmen Cavallero organ records and things like that. It was great. But so I would do rip and read of the news at the top of each hour, and I'm embarrassed to say that I pronounced his name Menachem Begin. Yeah. And it was the only time I got a call from the owner of the radio station.
Wow.
Just like, yeah, that hurt. That hurt. That was bad.
Here's the beauty part. On YouTube, they have these little videos that tell you how to pronounce virtually everything.
Right.
Like our last guest was named Javier Oist, and I had to look it up on YouTube. And they had his name OJST, and it's pronounced Oist. And I'm okay, Oist. Great. So I when I met him, I pronounced his name pretty close to being correct. So I was happy about that. But we didn't have that back then. It's like we had no helpers. When you and I were coming up, there were everybody can find an answer to everything in 20 seconds now. There's another way the world has changed,
Oh, we should talk about AI in wrestling. That's a whole separate podcast. I was just thinking about it, like
AI in wrestling.
We should ask one of the AI bots to generate the ultimate wrestling villain or the ultimate wrestling good guy. What would that be?
Wow, there's a thought.
Let them mine the intelligence of the globe. That's all fed into ChatGPT, and so I've played with those AI bots a bunch, and I've done things like, hey, ChatGPT, write me the lyrics of a Bruce Springsteen song that's never been written, and it's pretty wretched what it comes up with.
Yeah.
But it's still learning. I mean, this is top of the first batter with this stuff. So who knows where it's going to be in 10 years?
It's a little scary to me, but what are you going to do? It's like an avalanche. Here it comes. Yeah, I can feel it. AI in the next 10 years is going to be huge in every field.
It is.
It's just, you can't stop it. Here it comes. The only
Yeah.
positive I see from it, you can't catch COVID from it. So that's basically the only positive
Yeah.
I see in all this. Yeah, exactly. It'll create its own AI COVID, right?
Well, speaking of technology advances, when I started, and this is my strained attempt at a segue here. When I started at the wrestling magazines, we were writing stories, and this was 1981. We were writing stories on typewriters.
Right.
And when you joined the magazines, and when I left them, we were writing them on computers. So
Right.
we sort of saw that transition in the publishing industry, which was pretty interesting. So let's dig in. Why don't we dig into it here?
Yeah, sure.
Let's give everybody a sort of a peek behind the scenes. And what what Bob and I had talked about doing for this episode was making a journey of the average wrestling magazine uh, from conception to
Mm-hmm.
printed product,
Right.
and not a specific magazine and a specific store, but just sort of generally what was the real nuts and bolts process of doing that.
Yeah,
And
I get that question all the time. What was it like
yeah,
to work there? And this is what we're going to try to explain now is what it was like to work here, other than the fact that everybody was nuts.
well, that, yeah, of course,
Yeah, right, yeah, but but we're going to try to lay down the nuts and bolts so you can sit right in with us and get involved with our editorial team and our art
that's right,
department along with us, and you will know what it's like to work in the legendary glory days of PWI
that's
in
right.
Rockville
So
Center and Freeport, New York.
strap in.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first, I think, the place to start, of course, is the magazine schedule.
Yes.
We had a schedule that probably, I guess it was I don't know, 6 months at a time, something like that. We would know, we would be able to look ahead, to next week, next month, and see what magazines were on the calendar. And you could look at, the first of the month and say, "Oh crap, we have 6 magazines to we have
Yes,
to
this week.
we have
Yes,
to
this week. Yeah.
create." Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so it was 3 or 4 in a week was
Oh yeah.
not unusual at the height.
I mean, I'm
Um,
sure that the older fans who read the magazines must have realized that because they were all coming out in the newsstand. You'd see 4 new GC London
yeah,
products be delivered on the same day.
and we talk about all the wrestling titles, and I think one of the ones we mentioned last time was Wrestling Bad Guys, which I had
Right.
forgotten about.
Right.
Did you know about Wrestle America? You were there for
Yes, I
that.
worked on Wrestle America. Sure.
Now, do you
Sure.
know where Wrestle America came from?
No idea.
I did not realize this until I started flipping through a couple of magazines that I have laying. Wrestle America was the renamed Sports Review Wrestling.
We
So
renamed it?
Sports Review Wrestling went away and became Wrestle America. Yep.
That I don't. Oh gosh, I don't remember that. I just thought we started
I
a new
didn't remember
title.
that either. Yeah. I guess
Were
we
you
finally
working
put the.
WCW at that point? Maybe because it was real
I think
late.
so. Yeah. That was
Well,
WCW
maybe we
times.
did that while you were working. Up to your knees in WCW, but Wrestle
Could be.
America,
Yeah. Wrestle America.
and it still says Sports Review Wrestling in the snipe underneath.
Yes, it
So
does. Under Wrestle.
technically,
That's
with
right.
the codes, it was still Sports Review to the distributors.
Exactly.
Yes.
You had to play those games because
You had to play
otherwise.
those games because you'd have to start a whole product, get a whole new set of clearances, and it was harder to get it on the newsstand that
Yep.
way.
Yep. So this is the kind of weeds we're going into, folks.
Yes.
Deep in the weeds of the
You must be
publishing.
real excited, y'all.
There we go.
Oh
so
my gosh.
so
All right.
step one of any magazine was, you probably did a bunch of these things too, was you would take a sheet of paper, we called it a layout sheet,
Right.
and it was roughly the size of a 2-page spread of the New York Times. It
Right.
had squares all over it, numbered pages, and you would map out page for page, page 3, this is the contents. Page 4, that's an ad. And where the columns go, where all the stories go.
I'm proud to say I used a layout sheet until April of 2021.
Really?
All that time. All that time. Every job I had since I left there, we still use the broadsheet layout sheets.
Yep.
It's just easier to do. Pass it around, make changes to it, write them on there. So even as we went into electronic publishing that was totally electronic, we still use these faithful draw a line on it, ad for, blow up dolls.
Yeah. Johnson
boom,
Smith
on page 5. Johnson Smith, page 32. Right. The whole page. Boom, boom. But right,
man,
no,
yeah, centerfold.
I'm proud to say that I am a layout
That's
genius.
cool. Yeah.
I've created probably thousands of them all by
the
myself.
visual, and yeah, I mean, even it's probably the forerunner of wireframes. If anybody in the audience is a digital designer for things like mobile apps and whatnot, that's basically what we did.
You're saying that back in the day, that's the first thing we did was the layout sheet.
The first thing was the layout sheet.
Now, when I was managing editor, I used to have to place the ads. Oh, okay, that's right. Okay,
right. The ads would be placed in the layout sheet.
We would have ad wells. We would leave a spot, like a full page, eighth page, or
right.
quarter page, or a half page.
Yep.
And it was my job to determine what went in those holes.
Right.
Right. But that happened after we determined what the editorial was.
Right. And you could always, once you had the basic layout sheet done, you could always, erase and, this story was 5 pages long. We're going to make it 4 pages because we got a full page ad that we're going to throw in.
Right.
So you'd have those sorts of adjustments you can make. But really, the first step, I think, in the real production of the magazine was when somebody would scream out, "Headlines!" And that was when all the editors would gather their chairs in a circle, and Bill Apter would join the circle with a fistful of manila folders. And if he was doing Jerry Lewis that day, he'd come walking over like, "Oh, sir, with the folders," and he'd drop the folders all over the place. And, you'd have 15, 20 minutes of Jerry Lewis shtick that would result.
And we all laughed uproariously.
We did.
No, we did not.
No,
because by my 4th year of weekly Jerry Lewis shtick, it got a little rote. We'll put it that way. Well, he didn't really change up the punchline there a whole lot.
He's a genius, and he's a genius in France.
Yes, he is.
But far more than Jerry Lewis, though, I will say, Bill had a character called Mr. London. Do you remember Mr. London?
Absolutely, I don't.
Oh, so we were London Publishing. And, Mr. London, he had a bowler hat, and he had the Lord Albert Hayes monocle. Bill would put the monocle in and the bowler hat on. He would walk around, and I think he had a cane also. And he'd go, he'd walk around talking in a British accent. "Oh, yes, it's Mr. London here, just coming around to see how things are going in my company." And he'd go from desk to desk and just sort of, free associate with what was going on.
My God.
Bob Smith, let me see, what story are you working on today, Bob?
How did I miss this?
Oh, Mr. London was great. I love.
Was
Mr.
he a
London.
Freeport character that didn't come to Rockville Center or something? Because I don't
remember
saw
Rockville
it.
Center also.
I missed that.
Or maybe he started in Rockville Center and he was pretty. I think it was in Pennsylvania also.
Well,
Mr. London was.
Well, he did Mr. London. He did Ed Sullivan. Don't forget Ed Sullivan, the Ed List.
Well, the real thing with Bill that was fun is, and everyone's listening to this going, "Why the hell don't you talk about the headlines?" Well, no, this is what we would do.
That's right. It took us this long to get to them.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, we would sit around in a circle.
It's just like this. There's nothing changed, folks.
Exactly.
Have a seat. You want to pop? Have a pop, because we're going to get to them in about 10 minutes. So
exactly, because we would just we'd have to mess around to get to the actual work. But this was the creative process. No, so the other thing with Bill is Bill, because Bill loves doing impressions, and we would layer impressions on top of impressions. So Bill, do Bruno Sammartino doing an impression of Hulk Hogan, or Bill, do Jerry Lewis doing an impression of Vince McMahon, and Bill would do it. I'm not even going to try and emulate what he did, but
I do a fair Bruno, but I can't do Bruno doing anybody else. It's like, I doggone it, in 78 in 78 I lost 70 pounds, and I retained my strength, yet it developed speed on top of. That's actually a cross between Bill Apter and.
Do you remember Bill's famous Bruno knock knock joke?
What was it?
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Vince.
Vince who?
Vince, who took the belt from me. Vince, who destroyed my career. Vince, and then he would just go on and on.
Right.
I
Oh,
apologize, Bill, if you're listening to this.
no.
I'm
We got to
not
get,
doing it justice.
something? We have to get Bill on this
Oh
feeble
yeah,
little podcast. We really do.
he'll be
Bill's a
great.
busy boy anymore.
He is.
He's still at it. You can't stop him.
Yeah, he's doing the conventions and he's traveling around. He's going to England. He's all over the map. He's crazy. But
He's
God bless him. I love him.
yeah.
So headlines, we get around a circle. Bill would come over with a fistful of folders and it'd be, okay, Bill, what do we have for this issue coming up?
Well,
And
let's
let's
wait. Before you go there, let's
yeah,
backtrack.
okay.
How did he get the information in those folders? Answer: he was our concierge between the wrestling promotions, the
Yes, he was.
photographers, and us, the editorial
Yes.
team. He would deliver the photos to us as well as have the information on what's going on in each individual territory.
Yep.
Sometimes I came up with it, sometimes you came up with it, but 75% of that stuff was Bill Apter giving us the poop on what's going on. Am I right or wrong?
Exactly. And even as
Mhm.
we're writing the stories, you sort of reach you come up against a speed bump, like, oh, is it okay for this wrestler to say this or that, or what's the hey Bill, what's the story with so and so? Is it okay if I have him say this, or is it okay if Bill kept abreast of every angle in every promotion, everywhere. It was amazing,
It really
and
was.
yeah,
We never gave him the credit for that. He deserves a ton of credit. Where would we have been without him? Seriously. There
lost.
was
Nope,
nobody like him
no,
in the wrestling world. I'm telling you
nope,
right now.
absolutely
Every other wrestling magazine had a headline like Hulk Hogan, what a guy. We had headlines that depicted the angles of the day.
right.
Now, granted, we had a problem with that because here's another thing about wrestling magazine production back then. Probably 5 to 6 weeks after we sent the thing out for print, it would
Yep,
hit the newsstand, and you'd have three angles in between. If it was a multifaceted angle, it would have been old news sometimes by the time we hit the newsstand, right? You recall that coming back to bite
absolutely.
us in the ass a lot.
And that was the hardest part. We're sitting around writing headlines. So Bill would pull out a folder of, I don't know, photos of Tommy Rich versus Buzz Sawyer. And, maybe this is like the fifth time that they've wrestled and this is a cage match. And maybe it's the last time they're going around because after this series of matches that we have photos of, Buzz is going on to the next angle and Tommy's going on to something else. But how do we make that fresh and interesting, even though both guys have gone on to the next steps in their respective storylines? How do we make that relevant to someone a month and a half from now? That was
Right.
always the challenge in coming up
Mm-hmm.
with headlines. So we couldn't really be newsy specifically. We had to bring something more to the
Right.
table, and
Maybe
that
point
was
out the excessive violence in a match. Maybe something personal between the two that could linger for a while. You had to
right.
kind of exploit some little facet of it that may have come and gone. But if it's a territory article, we could get away with it because maybe not everybody saw the matches. That was the beauty part. That was to our advantage. When we were covering stuff that wasn't WWE, we could present stuff in a more newsworthy way because not everybody could see it. They were learning
Right.
about it through our magazines.
Yeah, they didn't know if we were right or wrong. They trusted us.
I still am not sure. All right. So we know at this point, headlines. We still haven't figured out how we came up with the headlines. Our headlines were better than other magazines. We had the
Right.
best headline. I do insist on that. Say what you want about the articles. I thought our headlines were
Well,
the sizzle that sold the steak.
and one of the things that was great about headline sessions was, and to sort of fast forward a little bit, virtually every story in every magazine we did started with the headline.
Right.
That was it. It's not like, you know, real journalism where,
No,
where you
right,
write
right.
where you write the story and then the headlines comes
But
last.
it's definitely true. The first thing we did was the headlines. We didn't write the
The
story
absolute
first. The
first thing was
headline
the
was
headlines.
first.
Right.
We wrote the story based on the headline.
Exactly. Based on the headline, and the headline was based on the photos. And so the great thing about headline writing was we're all sitting, and it wasn't just the writers. I mean, the photographers, Jason Lavin was there as he was a photographer. He wasn't a writer, but he knew wrestling and he contributed. So anybody could contribute. No idea was off base. It's just throw it out there because even if you had a really stupid idea that was would never in a million years make it into the magazine, that idea might spark something else that would make it into the magazine. So it was just from a purely creative perspective, it was just a wonderful process for getting to something that, finally the headline would be blurted out and people, oh yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. Yeah, we could work with that. But that whole process of getting there was, sometimes it was easy, sometimes it took a long time.
And sometimes you have great photos of something that wasn't really all that exciting on its face. Like he came up with, I remember Bill brought us photos from Texas, world-class champion at that point was Al Perez. And we're all going, Al Perez, what do we got to say about Al Perez?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, oh, geez, I don't know what to say about Al Perez. And I'm thinking, I go, wait a minute. On the show, a couple guys are complaining that they're not getting title shots they think they deserve. And it just comes to you. And you go, the champion who isn't, Al Perez fiddles while world-class burns. It just comes out of you. That was the headline we used. I remember this. It's like, so you fashion an article about how he's not giving anybody title shots or he's just hasn't been available. He's in another territory at the time. Create the angst amongst the other wrestlers and should have a bunch of pictures of him beating up people. And you got a great article with a great hook to go with it. So
Bill,
I just remember that one just popped in my head.
Bill, we don't have a great shot of Al Perez for the lead on this story. Can you call down to Texas and see if we can get a shot of him playing the violin?
Yeah, right.
Shot him fiddling.
No, but that would work. And we had a picture of Al Perez with his hands in. He was going, "What? Me worry?"
Yeah.
Remember the picture? His hands were like this. He looked like Alfred Newman with the hand. What? Me worry? So he had this shit-eating grin on his face and his hands out extended. Like, what did I do? Yeah, just like that. Yeah, right. That's Al Perez, ladies and gentlemen. You can't see him, but I swear he's here right now.
That's my Alfred E. Newman Funko I'm showing Bob here.
All right. So there's the headline sessions, and we came up with some beauties. I mean, and they look good. They look good on the covers. They were real sell headlines long before SEO, folks. We could write hooky headlines. There's no question about that. We
sure could.
You have any magazines there?
I do have a few. I don't know. Mil Mascaras. This is the first PWI I worked on, December 81. Mil Mascaras sadly reveals I must leave the WWF.
Okay, why? Oh, see? That's the hook.
Here's the Road Warriors on the cover of The Wrestler. Hey, Legion of Doom, go for the title or go away.
More of an editorial. Okay.
Sting wins the U.S. Well, we did a lot of stories of actual title changes here. Wrestling Superstars. Oh boy, here's one. Wrestling Superstars was a magazine that had sort of, most magazines, I guess, had 4 or 5 stories in them. Wrestling Superstars really basically had 2, maybe 1 filler in there, but there were 2 really chunky ones. One was the Dream Match, and then the other was usually some sort of big section. The 10, in this case, the issue that I have here is wrestling's 10 most overrated and underrated stars. So we've got, Flair on the cover as being overrated, Ultimate Warrior being underrated, Nikita Koloff being overrated, and who is that? I can't even tell.
Said it on the cover?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a little daring.
And so it would be like a 15-page section of overrated. So basically they were page burners, right? They would chew up a lot of pages, but it would be like a big section. So between the section and the Dream Match, that was most of Wrestling Superstars.
But I think we found out.
By the way, you know who one of the underrated stars in this issue was?
Who?
Virgil. I'll just leave that there.
Of course. No, I just you know what we found out, folks, and Craig was big in this. Lists actually worked.
Yeah,
lists tend to do well.
To your ultimate dismay, but yeah,
why? I never felt that way.
The 500.
Oh, that list! Wow, good
that
gosh.
List.
That's not a list. That's the list.
But well, every magazine did that, right? That wasn't uncommon to us.
Oh yeah.
List. Rolling Stones top 100 albums of all time. It's hey, the experts are determining this, and it's a great thing to argue over and discuss.
It's a great thing to argue over.
We used
the Rolling Stone list. I'm always complaining they leave people off this list, and people that are on the list Jack White again? Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just my editorial. It's just my editorial point.
Sorry,
there.
Jack.
Yeah, no, I'm not sorry at all. But it's they work. I think it's something everybody can join in on and have an opinion about, and that kind of works for everybody.
So we do the headlines, and the other thing we need to take into account, in addition to what you mentioned earlier, Bob, was how's the story going to play a month and a half from now when it hits the newsstands, or 2.5 months from now when it's still on the newsstands before the next issue hits.
Right.
Is the balance of territories in the magazine. And this was back in the early mid 80s. This was more of a concern, right? So you had to have your 1 or 2 WWF stories, 1 or 2 NWA stories, and let's get an AWA story in there. Let's get a world class story in there. Let's make sure things are balanced. We don't want it too top heavy to one federation or another. And sometimes that was hard to do, but
well, it was tough, especially, we knew who sold on the cover, and for the longest time it was Hogan.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure there were times when you put out 3 magazines in 2 weeks and 2 of them had Hogan on the cover.
Absolutely. And you do that for months and months and months.
And I got news. If it was PWI and the wrestling, the third one was Sports Review. I hate to say it, the NWA guy was on Sports Review. Yeah. That's just the way it went. It was like the lost leader of the cover in that regard. And we're not putting anybody down from the NWA. There's one name that I'm thinking of that I'm not going to say. You know who it is, but if I say NWA, who do you think of?
Who do I think of?
Yeah, you say NWA.
NWA. I think of 2 guys, actually, right off the bat.
All right, who?
Flair and Race.
There you go. All right, but Race never sold magazines.
No,
but Ric Flair did.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So if it wasn't Hogan, it was Race, or excuse me, Flair. Sorry,
but
King.
But then the other thing too is, like you say, Hogan sold. So now it's 83, 84, 85, 86. Hogan's on top. He's all on top. So now headlines. Okay, here's Inside Wrestling. Here's the 487th Hulk Hogan story that we have to come up with a headline for. The pictures are, I don't know, Hogan versus
Earthquake.
Like what are we going to do?
What are we going to say? I was just talking on another podcast about it. I'm sitting down going to write a Hulk Hogan article. What am I going to say about him now? It was like, what do you do?
What can you do that you haven't done 87 times already before?
Yeah.
And
because, his programs were all the same. Somebody would hurt him somewhere along the line.
Right.
Somebody would Earthquake smashed him on TV. Ooh, I'm going to get you with the vitamins and whatever. How many times can you go back to that well and write about that? It was really hard with Hogan with me. That's why I like to cover the original Midnight Express. I knew I could say new fresh things about them, or if I wanted to write about Big Bully Busick or somebody, at least it was somebody different.
It was a creative challenge. It was,
it really was.
Okay, what are we going to do? But 433rd headline had to sound as fresh as the first.
But if we can go back to the covers, I'm watching people, all of our friends online. Bless all of you. You make my day every time you put a GC London magazine as a tweet or a Facebook post. I love it. I know Craig does.
Me too. Oh, I do.
But
I see that stuff on Twitter. It just makes my day.
All right. So today I'm scrolling. Just recently, I go Flair, Hogan, Ultimate Warriors on that one. Tito Santana. What? I'm trying to figure out how Santana snuck in there. He was always popular. Don't get me wrong, but I think he got a title shot against somebody, Iron Sheik or somebody, and he made the cover.
Yeah,
of Inside or one of those magazines. And I'm like, wow, they put Tito Santana as the main image.
The main shot, not the one up in the corner.
No, the main shot. Yeah.
Okay, that's
another time.
Good.
Tony Garea with Graham had him in an arm bar at a match I was actually at in Albany before I worked for you guys. Tony Garea got his cover.
Holy,
of course, he was screaming in pain, but he was on the cover, main focus.
Well, it was a big honking deal when Jerry Lawler got his PWI cover, and I still remember that photo, the orange background.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the first time that PWI cover featured somebody who And Jerry was awesome, but back when he was on the cover, he was still Memphis. Memphis didn't
Right.
have the national.
Right. And this wasn't AWA champion Jerry. This was long before that, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that was taking a chance.
It really was taking a chance. And I forget the headline we had on there that really helped sell it, but I think it was the first time we really deviated with PWI and said, all right, let's give something a shot here.
I remember when he did win that AWA belt and he combined it with whatever the other belt was. I don't know if it was the CWA, USWA, or World Class, whatever the hell it was. But there was a time when he was going to Continental and he was working in Memphis and he was working other indies here in the East. And I put him in the ratings as number one. And I thought the roof was going to collapse. Because you still had Flair and WCW. Right. I don't know if it was Hogan or maybe Ultimate Warrior. And Lawler's number one? Are you kidding? And I remember the mail we got was like, how can Lawler be number one? I never see him. But
we'll talk much more about the ratings in a few minutes.
We kind of weighed it, So okay, we'll get into the ratings a little bit.
So we've got our plan sheet, we've got our headlines, we've got our photos. Hey, Bill, these photos stink. I need a couple more to add to the whatever. Bill would pull some color photos for the cover. Well, we'd also decide who's going to be on the cover, right? As a result of,
like we just talked about.
Yeah, sometimes it was obvious, but, sometimes there was some discussion. Ken Morgan, who you quite appropriately gave credit to last time I was on. Boy, was he terrific.
I can't emphasize enough.
Boy, he could shine a turd.
How easy he made our jobs.
Yeah.
He was so good that we didn't even discuss these articles with him. And every time the tone was correct, the font was correct, the style was correct, the placement on the covers were correct. We never had to think about it twice. He was a magician. Yeah, he was the unsung star of all those years of the wrestling magazines.
I actually have a copy of The Wrestler here, which I think is pretty awesome. The headline is Roddy Piper's exclusive analysis, Flair versus Hogan, who will win the match of the century. And so you've got a photo of Hogan leg dropping Flair, but then in the background, in just sort of like a red and black background, you have Piper overlooking the leg drop. It's just a beautiful cover. I always love these sort of. I always love those sort of things.
Question,
and that's pure Ken Morgan right there.
But here's the question: if he's predicting the match of the century, was that a composite photo?
That was a composite photo. That would have been Hogan leg dropping who the hell knows, and then Flair on his back. We had a few shots of those.
We'd never know it
in the files, but yeah, it looks like the actual match. Which at that time, that's a hell of a cover.
That really was.
And that's all beautiful. Ken Morgan. That's all Ken Morgan. I mean, he really.
Well, I'm going to have to start a YouTube version of this because you guys are missing a beautiful cover there. You really are.
Yeah, dig it out of your files. Somebody's got it out there. December 1991, The Wrestler.
I was there.
It's a good one. I'll scan that in and we can pop that one on social media for.
Yes, that's the one
for
we
promoting this. Yeah. Promoting the podcast. So so we'd come up with the cover. Ken Morgan was hugely instrumental in that. He could take, like in that example, 3 photos unrelated and make a terrific cover out of it.
I can't overemphasize. The more I think about it, I've never had an art director like that. You could just hand him a pile of stuff, not even explain what the stuff was about. He would look it over, figure it out, and bang. And he was quick too. It's not like we had to wait for this stuff.
Super quick.
Never missed a deadline. Ever.
Which I've said that many times over the years. That's the proudest thing. Let's give a shout out
to the other guys by name.
Yes.
Can you name a lot of the art guys that were there in your tenure? Or
Charlie Foster.
Charlie Foster. That's right.
Foster. Oh, he looked like a cross between. Who's the guy that at the Oscars that did the one-arm push-ups? He was in the movie.
Jack Palance?
He looked like a young Jack Palance.
Yeah, kind of.
He was funny as hell.
He
had a dry sense of humor. Right. Boy, he was great. He worked for Stanley. He worked for a bunch of men's magazines. what they call famously call the men's sweat magazines.
Yes,
Men's Adventure and
gritty,
those,
pulpy magazines.
Yeah, the real pulpy stuff. So in fact,
he was there. He was there back when Stanley was doing Western magazines and stuff too, right?
Western and Detective. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
And I once remember early game console system in television.
Sure, I had one.
I had one too, but then I traded it to Charlie, and he gave me a couple of paintings that were used on the covers of the men's sweat magazines. So
wow.
I still have one, which is
you got the better of that deal, boy.
That was great. So was Charlie Foss. Then you had Stu's wife, Darlene. Was in the art department.
I never knew that.
Yes,
I never knew that.
You never knew that they were a thing?
Swear to God, never heard of that before.
Yeah. So Darlene Sachs, she worked with her station was right next to Ken. Then you had Joe Kalman.
Joe Kalman, that's right.
Yep. Who did layouts. He made the move to Pennsylvania.
He made the move. I was going to say that, yeah.
There were
Frank
Morano.
Or as we used to call him, Yunky Man.
Yunky Man?
Well, we called him Yunky Man because for some reason he would bring a sandwich in every day and it was wrapped in aluminum foil. And it would get bigger and bigger until it was like a softball on his desk. And one day the cleaning lady comes in and goes, "Ooh, you Yunky Man." And it stuck. He used to, so somebody gave him one of those business placards, that you'd see the boss have in front of his desk with the name, and just said Yunky Man.
That's great.
Frank was really funny. Frank had the unbelievable dry. He was the art department Steve Farhood. He had a dry sense of humor and could just fracture you at a moment's notice. And very funny man, and a good layout guy too.
We had a guy he wasn't there long, and he didn't make the move to Pennsylvania. Don Rodriguez.
Oh, Don, yeah.
Remember Don?
Yeah.
And then of course we had our production manager. What was it? Carl Lovick was his actual title was chief of production. And we used to call him chef of production. But Carl Lovick. And I think I told this story in the last episode of the greatest practical joke I ever saw, which was Stu and Darlene playing a joke on Carl Lovick. Did I tell that story last time?
No.
Oh, I said, again, this all ties into the production of the magazines, because this is the sort of thing we would do to sort of keep up the atmosphere in the office that, we worked hard and we played hard. So I'm pretty sure you were there for this. This was a time when lottery fever really started gripping New York. It was one of the first mega multi-million-dollar jackpots in New York lottery history. And Carl Lovick got lotto fever in a big way. He's running around the office. Oh, I'm going to be a multimillionaire. He's like trying to get people. You want to buy tickets with me? You want to buy? Let's pool our money. Let's buy a bunch of
office pool time, right?
Office. Right. He was all in on the whole lottery thing. So imagine that the lottery drawing. I don't remember which day it was, but let's say for the sake of the story, the drawing was done on a Wednesday. Okay, so. He's selling shares, it's 50 cents a ticket. Give me a nickel, I'll give you 10% of the ticket. He wanted everybody in. So, this lottery fever. So Wednesday, everyone goes home from work and they draw the numbers Wednesday night for the bazillion-dollar prize. Thursday morning, on the way into work, Stu and Darlene stop off at a convenience store and they buy a lottery ticket. Now, the ticket they buy, of course, is for next week's drawing. Mm-hmm. But the numbers that they buy are the previous night's winning numbers.
Oh, got it? Yeah.
So now they get into the office and it's the morning and everyone's having their buttered rolls and their coffee. And Carl is sitting there at his desk like, rah, 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 dag nabbit. And I should add, by the way, that when you see pictures of Matt Brock in the magazine, that was Carl.
Oh, God, you just let it right out of the bag right there. I thought it was Brian R. Solomon.
So Carl's like,
guys, go on Twitter. You'll know what we're talking about.
That's right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Carl's, I didn't win the lottery. There's somebody else, but I don't know. I didn't win any money. Right? He's griping and grumbling about not winning anything in this Mega Millions Lotto fever. And Darlene plays dumb, and she played it perfectly. Carl, I bought a ticket yesterday, and I don't really know how this whole lottery thing works. Can you check the ticket for me? I don't really know how to do this. So, all right, yeah, give me the ticket. So he gets Darlene's ticket and he's looking at the newspaper and he's checking the numbers. And he's like, oh, you got one number. All right, that's something. Let's see. Oh, look at that. You got two numbers. Oh, three. Well, now, of course, he's not checking the date on the ticket. He's just checking
Right,
the
of course
numbers.
not. Right,
He
right.
sees 6 out of 6, and he goes out of his mind. Stu, I can't believe it. She won the lot. He's running around the office. I can't believe it. And the plan was for Stu to look at the ticket and go, Carl, you're full of crap, and tear the ticket in half. But Carl was he was so taken, like literally all the blood washed out of his face. We had white wallpaper in the office, and he was the same color as the wallpaper. He for like that minute and a half, he absolutely believed that Stu and Darlene had won the $100 million or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And yeah, we had to let him down easy because he probably literally would have had a heart attack had Stu torn that ticket in half. But it was great. I never saw a prank work better in my life.
Oh my gosh. It's almost cruel, guys. It's almost cruel. But
yeah,
it's a little edge you have to, dance on that tightrope a little bit.
But
That's a good one. That was
so Carl's station was in the art department. So him and Ken Morgan would, sort of butt heads once in a while, but
yeah,
they were good. But yeah,
that department ran so seamlessly most of the time.
It really did.
It really
and like
did.
You said earlier, we never missed a deadline, which given the
not
volume,
even close.
Yeah.
And we'd have power failures and other problems, and we'd still somehow make our deadlines, even with the workload we had.
So
you know why we never missed a deadline? Because we wanted to be on time. We all felt the same.
Yeah. Yep.
I've been in with other publishing people. Well, we missed the deadline, so we'll do it next week. Oh, seriously, bigger companies than London was, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, we took a lot of pride.
Fall behind? No, you don't fall behind.
Yeah,
in fact, one of the magazines I worked for after I left London, I caught up 5 months in 3 weeks. They were 5 months behind. I caught them up in 3 weeks.
Wow. Well, because you had the work ethic of London.
No, I sat down and did the whole book. So I knew how to do a whole book at that point. No, seriously. Well, I have done entire magazines in my career, entire magazines from soup to nuts, including ad placements. I have written every story, everything except the photos. I have done it so often I can't even put it. And thanks to London.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't fall behind because we had 4 more magazines next week.
That's exactly right. Not to mention Fantasy Baseball Weekly and PWI Weekly and Colored Socks Weekly. We did it all, folks.
Yes, we did. So we had our cover, we had our layout sheet, we had our stories, our headlines were written. Now it was time to sit down and actually write the stuff.
Right.
And the memories that I have of writing stuff. So I started out writing on typewriters, which was interesting, but we didn't know computers, kids back in those days. Get off my lawn. So yeah, you'd bang the thing out on a typewriter, 3 pages, double spaced, hand it over to Peter King or later Stu Sachs, who would edit it with a pen. And maybe you'd have to go back and retype it. Usually it was just a couple of corrections here and there. But then that corrected 3 pages of typewriter story would go to, I'm trying to remember her, Carol Buck, sat in the back of the office in Freeport, all the way in the back corner. I mean, she didn't talk to anybody. Nobody talked to her except to walk over and hand her 3 more pages of stuff that she had to retype into a typesetting machine.
Oh my gosh.
And the typesetting machine would spit out long columns of type.
That I remember.
And you'd have to cut them down and feed them through a waxer. So the back of the type had wax on it and it would be pasted down on artboards.
I have done those things in my early career.
Oldest of old school. It was the oldest of old school.
CompuGraphic, the smell of that fixer.
And
Right, remember the CompuGraphic Fixer smell?
Yep, yep. And then every once in a while, yeah, it had the same smell as Polaroid pictures,
Yes, very similar.
as I
Yes.
recall. It was that
Mhm.
same sort of
Right.
chemical,
Yeah.
whatever. And yeah, and so the art department would be fed these long strips of type, and they'd have to lay them out on art boards and leave spaces for photos. Um, Carol would have to retype headlines in larger font to be pasted down onto the art boards. And sometimes stories would be an inch too short or an inch too long. So we'd have to go in and either write another paragraph to add to the story or cut out a few sentences to make it fit.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was
I am
it
glad
was
I joined when I did.
it was real manual work. So now when you
Yeah.
came along, we were using a system called ATEX,
That's right.
ATEX, which at
Mhm.
that time was state of the art. Newsweek actually was using the system, and Stanley Weston made an investment of nearly $200,000 to bring London publishing into the state of the art, which in those days was very, very impressive.
I am kind of shocked sometimes that he didn't invest in a pagination machine back in those days, where you could assemble a page and the text in one fell swoop.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I
maybe
wonder.
you know what? Probably the printer was not technologically capable of doing it at that point. Pagination machines, by the time I got to PWI,
Right.
were still a pretty new thing. I happened to work in a newspaper that had one. You cannot believe how much time it saved. It was crazy.
And you were saying earlier before we got on air, you, because you live close to the office, actually did a little bit of babysitting for the ATEX system. So
I
like
was its
describe
daddy.
what that
Yes,
was like. Like if people
yes.
remember floppy disks,
Well, this
like
was imagine a 20-pound giant butterscotch disc, for lack of a better term. It kind of looked like a big honk and with a big crank on the top of it. You would
yeah.
have to. We would take the disc out every night, put the machine to sleep, and in the morning I'd have to come in and put the thing back in, take the crank out of it, pull the crank out, close the machine, and turn it on.
And these things were like,
that was our computer back. That was our server.
yeah, it was like 2 foot, a foot and a half maybe wide,
Yeah,
2 feet
yeah,
wide.
yeah. It was big. It was like a platter. It looked like a
Oh yeah.
delicious ShopRite cold cup platter coming your way, but it wasn't. It was
Yeah, with the cake,
with the cake,
dish
yeah, in the middle,
topper on
yeah,
top.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. But yeah, it was. And as I look back at it, I wonder if removing it was the right thing to do each night. I question it now, knowing what I know about disc now. But who knows? That might have been the exact right thing to do. But
I
since I
guess.
live close, I was elected. Would you take? Would you? Take this out at night and when you come in the morning when you put it in? I go sure, because I was right around the corner. Once I moved near there, I could
Right.
easily do that, so I didn't mind at all.
And it
It
was a
was easy.
special refrigerated room.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And oh boy, if there was a power failure,
Oh gosh.
panic would set in.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh gosh.
Yeah, it
I
was
wasn't. I don't think I was ever there for power failure. I'm glad I wasn't. That would have been daunting.
Jurassic era of computers.
Yeah.
I remember being trained on the ATEX system, and the guy that came in and trained us taught us some sort of keyboard trick. Like instead of doing this thing in 3 keyboard clicks, you could do it in 1 keyboard click. And I remember thinking, yeah, like that's going to make a difference. I think of that so often through the years.
Yeah.
Every time you're typing something, it's like, yeah,
Well,
that actually does make a
I
difference.
will say this: ATEX was the stone mallet of word processing programs. It was so archaic and so.
Oh, it really was.
It was like first generation word processing, and it was make sure you save your work because it'll disappear if you don't. I'll tell you that right now. And you had to make a copy of everything you did, or you were screwed. I mean, it was, and now it's so much. Oh God, I think back at what we all did back then just to get the workaday stuff done. It was much harder than it is now. There's no
Oh
question
yeah.
about that.
It was
I mean,
it was a big
you could buy a $199 Chromebook and have all the ingredients you need to start word processing in a proper way now. I
yeah,
can't imagine what the job would have been like with modern laptops.
we could have put out 10 magazines a month.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it was a big black screen. Maybe it was,
Yes,
I don't
with
know,
white
12
type, right?
inches, green type, as I recall.
That's right,
Green or white
machine-like
type.
type.
Yeah, it was ancient. But yeah, that was the ATEX system.
But boy, did I type a lot of words. Holy smokes. I know you did too. We all did, but I was nothing if not prolific. I was wow. I used we were talking last time what's your record for a week of stories.
Yeah.
I know I did 2022 one month.
Yeah, I know my record was 6 in one day, but
Yeah. We sometimes we had to, folks. I mean, it was just the workload got to be a little insane at one point or two. And then they shoved a weekly newsletter on top of everything. And then we did we forgot this the last time we talked, Fantasy Baseball Weekly.
So, we often talk about how many stories we wrote, but there's also the magazines were more than stories. There were columns. Everyone had their own column. And your column was what was it called?
I had two. The PWI was the revival of the Steel Cage, which was somebody
The
else's
Steel
column
Cage,
before
right? And then in the Wrestler, you had
it was
something
Blindsided.
Blindsided.
Right?
And Blindsided I liked a lot because it reminded me kind of Larry King's column in USA Today.
Really?
It was just a lot of little. It wasn't like one story for the whole column. It was like each paragraph was like little random stuff. Throw it out there. Like, strawberries are great in season this year.
No, it wasn't. But I think I copped that from somebody, but it wasn't Larry King. It was some other New York based newspaper guy that I copped the whole idea from. Some of them were one theme, but I did a lot of them that were just like, why are the laces on Greg Valentine's boots so long? Stuff like that.
And then of course we had the letters columns had to be done.
Right.
And that was not actually those were harder than stories sometimes because you had to use real letters.
Well, we had to use real letters. Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
So, you go through all the letters and
I remember I tried to sneak one in on Stu once, and I remember him looking up from his machine. Mitsubishi Fuso? What?
I remember that. Yeah, because there was
I knew he wasn't gonna. It wasn't gonna.
Because I remember that exactly. Because there was a truck that was always parked like right. down the block from the office. The front of the truck said Mitsubishi Fuso. So that was like a correspondent for correspondent report.
I don't even know what it means to this day. But in any event, I knew I was trying to get a laugh out of him. He didn't think it was funny at all. No, so it wasn't demerit for me.
There you go.
2 tries. You're getting old there, kid. You're outdated,
That's why I'm on this podcast.
That's right.
So you had your columns, you had letters that needed to be done. Then there was
what was your column names? I don't remember.
My column in PWI was called In Focus.
That's right.
And
that is right.
Inside Wrestling was On the Road.
On the Road?
Yes, which I took over from Gary Morgenstein.
Right.
So yeah, it was On the Road. And actually On the Road, I don't think I told this story last time. Did I tell the Uncle Floyd story last time? Okay, so quick story about one of my early Inside Wrestling columns On the Road. Uncle Floyd, if you grew up in the New York, New Jersey area, was a tremendous kids show host. Pork pie hat wearing, piano playing Floyd Vivino.
Brother of Jimmy Vivino.
Exactly. And
they're all great musicians, everybody in the family.
Exactly. And plugged into the music scene and loved pro wrestling. He had the Uncle Floyd show on channel 97 or whatever it was on New Jersey TV. The lowest budget TV show you ever wanted to see. But
when it was on, it was hilarious. When it was on, when he caught the right note, he was the funniest thing on TV.
It was so good. And he had real musical guests. I think the Ramones were on his show at one point, and Larry Zbyszko was on his show.
And RBQ.
Was on. Yes, several times, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so Larry Zbyszko was on his show. And so one of Uncle Floyd's gimmicks was, in addition to playing the piano, he would sit at the desk and had a hand puppet called Oogie.
Yes.
Remember Oogie? Oogie was his hand puppet.
Yes, I do.
So, and
You see the price of gas these days? It's a scandal.
God, on Route 9, there's one station on Route. They would just like ad
Yes,
lib
yeah.
for 20 minutes, and it was
Mhm.
hilarious. But I loved Uncle Floyd show. So Larry Zabisco was on one. So I wrote this column where Larry Zabisco was at the Uncle Floyd show and got into some sort of altercation or got angry at something Floyd said. And this didn't happen. This was just for the sake of the column, and tore the studio apart. Okay, so in the column, I go to the Uncle Floyd show to follow up and find out what Zabisco did and get the story. Well, Uncle Floyd's not there, but Oogie is there. Right? This is, this is like talking to Senior Wences' hand
Yeah.
without
Hey,
Senior Wences being there.
what's this?
So I interview Oogie, which makes no sense whatsoever, right? Because
Right.
it's Uncle Floyd's house, but Uncle Floyd isn't there. Oogie is there. I talk to Oogie. I write the column. He tells me about Zabisco, the whole bit, blah blah blah. So magazine comes out a couple of weeks later. I'm still living at my folks' house. I hadn't even gotten my apartment yet. Again, this is one of the very first columns I wrote. And I'm coming out of the shower, and my mom says, "There's a phone call for you. Somebody named Floyd." I was like, "What?" He tracked down my address and phone number, gave me a call to tell me that he loved the columm.
Oh,
And
that's
he thought it
great.
was one of the greatest things he read. He was just loved it, was entertained by it, and the whole bit. Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
but just the absurdity of, yeah, it's like, Paul Winchell isn't there, but I'm going to interview Charlie McCarthy
Charlie Mahoney, yeah, right.
or
Mahoney,
Charlie
yeah,
Mahoney. Yeah.
right, yeah.
That was just
I will say this about Uncle Floyd. Late in his career, Channel 4 picked up his show. Channel 4, the big
NBC, really?
state. Yeah,
Wow.
about 1 a.m. after Tom Snyder or whatever it was.
Okay.
And he did a sketch. I know it was a revival of an old sketch. It was simply him making a sandwich.
Okay.
And he cuts the ham, and the ham goes, ooh, ooh. and he slices the bread. You hear these voices. And he sets the tomato, whoop, whoop. And here comes the mustard, bloop, bloop. And then he puts it all into sandwich form, takes a bite. You hear about 8 people screaming, which to this day is one of the 5 funniest things I've ever seen. I will pay $50 for anyone with a videotape of that. I am telling you, wow, is it funny? Holy smokes. When he was on, he was super funny.
He was great. He's and a hell of a piano player.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Barrel House McGee, boy, he was the best.
Yep. Boy, he was terrific.
Where were we?
So we're talking about columns. On the road and
Columns, letters, ratings.
Columns, letters. Yeah. So there was other stuff too. There were these columns like X-ray in The Wrestler. Remember that one?
Right.
That was where you take a wrestler. There'd be almost a full page shot of match action, and then 6 guys would talk about that wrestler.
Yeah.
Captain Lou, Killer Kowalski, Dory Funk Jr., Jim Ross, Lou Thez, Larry Hennig.
I remember Gersh Kunstman writing one of those. I think it was Road Warrior Hawk, and he had. I think when he first started, you made the point that everybody he wrote quotes for sounded like Gersh.
Yeah.
In other words,
it did.
He'd have somebody would say something to Road Warrior Hawk, and Hawk would go, "Oh, come now," which just doesn't fit the character of. Just was the right guy to say, "Oh, come now." So
I wish this was a YouTube podcast because somewhere I have Gersh's interview tape.
interview tape. Yeah.
Yes, he sent us a VHS tape that was a tour of his apartment and showing us like the bagels in his freezer that his mother bought for him. And, can I please have the job so I can move out of my parents' basement? It was great. It was pure Gersh.
He was a very funny guy. He really was. Nice guy. I'm glad he had found the success. I don't know what he's doing right now, though. That's the weird part.
I want to say he's still with the Brooklyn paper, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just haven't seen his name anywhere in a long time. So here's to you, Gersh, wherever you are, buddy.
Indeed.
It's great working with you.
So one of the very last things, if it was so one of the very last things in any magazine was Bill's column.
Right.
Right, because that was always the latest breaking news up to press time. Again, six weeks old by the time you get it off the stands, but the latest that we had. And yeah, Bill didn't always write his column.
But you know what? In a way, he did.
He did.
No, here's the thing. He would present us with the scenarios.
Yes.
In Portland, Owen Hart got beat up by Maka Singh, and he let us know that.
Right.
In Memphis, Bill Dundee ran over Jerry Lawler's dog, whatever it was, whatever was going, whatever. I'm sorry, whatever the angle. No ASPCA member here, please. But you know what I mean. He would come with us
Right.
with all these scenarios, and we would flesh them out. We would say when they happen, just like a news article, really.
Yeah.
A stream of consciousness news column is what Bill's columns were.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was,
and until next time, we'll see you at the matches.
At the matches, right? And so that was typically the next to last thing that was written.
Mm-hmm.
And then in PWI, we had something called the Wrestling Inquirer. Remember that?
I think so.
That was like a here's.
At the end, yeah, right. Yeah, it looked like the National Enquirer.
Right. It was like a 2-page like news that happened after Bill's column.
And laid out like a front page of a newspaper. When you lifted the magazine, not horizontally, but vertically, you would see these 2 pages and read them like the New York Times.
Right. And that was the stuff that happened after Bill's column was written. That was really the latest of the late breaking news. We should actually back up a little bit, because there's one other thing, particularly in PWI, that had to be written every month. And sometimes it was easy. And that was for the centerfold.
Oh, I thought those were easy. Yeah, I thought those were easy most of the time.
Yeah, there was the bio. Well, it depended who it was, right?
Well, it was the driest thing we wrote. It was strictly meat and potatoes, facts and figures, and yeah, it was good. It was
sort of their career in born and blah blah.
And the close up was kind of like their favorite hold and all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was
how their finisher,
favorite hold, most hated opponent, greatest match, toughest opponent.
Right.
So yeah, we do all that stuff, and then
let me back up. What we're talking about, that surrounded the centerfold, right? That was on each side of the centerfold, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The close up, which was the bio.
And I was talking to Rick Del Santo of the PWC podcast, and explaining another advantage we had with Bill Apter is everybody knows at this point that the WWF cut us out of their ringside photography area. They wouldn't let us in the matches anymore for a long time. But Bill had this way of catching up with stars while they were in another territory, about to enter the WWF or about to leave, or vice versa.
Yep.
So we could have a picture in the centerfold of Billy Jack Haynes, even though he was a star in the WWF, but nobody has to know it was taken in Portland. Or Jake the Snake Roberts when he was with the UWF.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? We had such an advantage in Bill in that he had a giant dossier. People would come to our studio in Rockville Center and pose for photos. We didn't even know when we were going to use them, but they all got used. With the exception of the Metal Maniac, but that's another story.
Even if it was just a face shot for a column, we would have those.
Metal Maniac got used. I'm sorry, buddy. You're out there somewhere. I know you are. But everything got used. Some centerfolds, but sometimes you'd have a Sergeant Slaughter come in, and he had taken studio shots of him at Kutcher's or something.
Right.
At Kutcher Mania, and we had the shot of him, and we could use him on the cover and say WWE explodes with whoever the new star is, even though it was taken at a previous job site, which is a wonderful thing.
Yep. And I remember one time, because Hogan was so huge, and we had just burned out all of our Hogan photo material,
AWA stuff,
the AWA stuff, and the stuff that we took from the stands and whatever else. We actually commissioned an artist to do an illustration of Hogan, America's Hero.
That's right.
Yep. So we even got into illustrated covers. So
that was a nice one too. That was beautiful.
It was a nice one. Yeah, with the big flag behind him.
Yeah, we were. You're right. We were running out of Hogan material. As much of it as we had, it just wasn't. We used up the cover-worthy Hogan material. We had a ton of material, but you had the rope problem where we were sneaking our Subway sandwich bags into the garden. 400 millimeter lenses, and he'd be doing his muscle pose, but he'd be cut off at the boobies because we were shooting from the 300 seats,
and we didn't have the Photoshop skills to get those ropes out of there yet.
That's right. So, gosh, pre-Photoshop, gang. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
pre-Photoshop, pre-word processing, pre-everything.
So then we have a magazine pretty much, but the last thing we put together, the
My job.
ratings.
My
The
job for at
ratings.
least 5 years there.
The
My
ratings.
favorite job there too.
Really?
Yes, easily my favorite thing to do. Easily. Not even
Now,
close.
what's interesting is if I look at the ratings from say 19, here's December 81 PWI.
81.
81. We only had 6 categories: WWF, NWA, AWA, tag teams, most popular, most hated. And it was just names.
Right.
Now, fast forward.
It got more fancy schmancy after a while.
Yeah, fast forward about 10 years. You've got the top 10. You've got tag teams, most popular, most hated, WCW, WWF, Global, USWA, USA, IWCCW,
Mm-hmm.
ECW, ICWA, IWF, PWA, PWF, SAPW, SMW, WIN, WWC. And then we did something called cumulative ratings, which got real sort of data nerdy, where we would assign point values in the top 10 singles and tag teams and do cumulative ratings for the last 5 issues. And then the highest it was sort of like a trend line as opposed to just the individual issue.
Right.
So they became very complex. And we would do things like we'd have the titles, we'd have what they were ranked last issue, you weight, hometown.
Now, which magazine are you looking at right there?
I'm looking at a wrestling. I'm looking at a wrestling superstars. Yeah,
now,
I mean, there was just a ton of information.
And I think PWI also had. Oh, we even had Indianapolis, if I remember correctly. The WWA, Great Wojo, and all that stuff. I believe.
Yes. I think we had a couple of revolving categories.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember putting that together, and it was always the Great Wojo was the champion every issue. It didn't matter what else was going on. He was their perennial champion there.
Yeah,
now he's looking at Wrestle America now, fans.
Yeah, Wrestle America was an interesting one because the conceit of that magazine was it was broken down into sections. So you WWF section, NWA section. So it wasn't like a 2-page ratings page. Right. Like you had your WCW ratings were over here and independent ratings were over there. But yeah, a lot of information in the ratings.
I really enjoyed doing the ratings, and which is a surprise because every issue they would change.
Yep.
Like if we did 3 issues, we did one on a Monday and another one on a Thursday, the ratings would be different in the Thursday magazine because things happen in the interim.
Yes.
Titles would change. People would leave federations, all that kind of thing. So it was a lot to keep up with, but I really enjoyed the heck out of that.
And we also had a page called Ratings Analysis.
Right.
Which typically was the last page of the magazine that, yeah, it would look at there was a lot, and you know more than anybody else, a lot of work went into those 3 pages.
Yes, but I loved every second of it. That was my favorite thing to do. I don't, you know why? Because growing up, it was my favorite thing in the magazines. Mm-hmm. All of them, from the Kaiser books to ours, ratings were my thing. And I kind of, weighted them a little differently, and Stu got wind of it. I don't think he was happy, but he let me do it in that. I always considered a pinfall win meant more than a disqualification win or a countout win. In other words, a pinfall weighed just a little heavier in my mind's eye.
Right.
Because that was a pinfall is the ultimate thing you're looking for as a wrestler, not a countout or a DQ. Somebody, kicks you where you're not supposed to be kicked and you get a win. Doesn't make you a better contender, I don't think. So he goes, "That's how you do it?" I said, "Yeah." He said that and putting them all together with what the information I got from Bill and you and whoever else was compiling. Every Monday we were on the phones. You remember that? Talking to the various federations. George South would call me, whatever his little league was at that point. And we had tons and tons of information every week to put the ratings together.
So it's almost a PWI 500 looking at all these categories.
It is. It's amazing. It looks daunting, doesn't it?
It's very daunting. Do you have any memories of anything that stands out while doing the ratings where it was like either you got grief
for
ratings, or just
Jerry
real
Lawler,
difficulty in putting it together?
Jerry Lawler as number one when he won the AWA title and was defending it, or what he called the Unified World Championship at that point, because it was, I forget what the other one was, probably USWA World Class at the same time. And we got flack, I think, from the NWA for putting him in number one, as I recall, because but Lawler was doing it old school. He was going to Continental, he was going to Alabama, he was going to Memphis, he was working in upstate at an indie. He was defending the champion against all comers like no champion was doing at that point. I think he deserved to be number one at that particular moment in time. We made him that. So that's the one time I can recall getting some flack for a choice that we made.
It's great. Just look at this magazine from '92. Just looking at these categories. So here's, just for the heck of it, WI. What was WIN?
Read me the names.
So the win, which is kind of a good name for good acronym for wrestling, right?
Yeah.
The win champion to be determined.
Must have been new.
Going from number 10 to number 1. Number 10, King Kalua. Number 9, Tommy Rose. Number 8, Sledgehammer McGill. Number 7, Kirk Dredd. Number 6, Agent Orange. Number 5, Tom Brandy. Number 4, Douglas Witherspoon. Number 3, AC Golden. Number 2, Neil Superior. Number 1, Max Thrasher.
That sounds like Philadelphia area. How the heck did they get in there?
I don't know.
I don't even know. And here's the point. Back then, if I was sitting across the room from you, I would know who every one of those guys were at that point.
and where they should be in the 500.
I really did, yes. But now it's like, huh? Who? What?
Wow.
Step away from it for 3.5 decades, and you'll forget them too. It's just the way it was. But back then, I knew who every one of those guys were.
I like the cumulative ratings thing. That was an interesting idea. So
I think that was only in that book, though.
Could be. These ratings are based on the past 5 issues of this magazine. We have examined our ratings for each of those issues in our top 10 and tag team categories only, and assigned each position a point value: 10 points for number 1, 9 for number 2, etc. So regular ratings reflect the past month. These cumulative ratings give an indication of wider trends in the sport. That's pretty cool. Like, how do you really bring data insights into pro wrestling? We kind of figured out a way to do it.
Ah, boy. And, at that point, you're talking 1992, you know how against the grain that was, considering, you had the bushwhackers running around and going, it was, you know what I'm saying? And you had, don't go messing with a country boy. And,
Legion of Doom were number 10 in tag teams.
Matilda has been kidnapped from the British Bulldogs, and we're doing cumulative ratings, folks.
Yeah. Wow. So that was a lot of work for the ratings. I think more than people realize.
We all worked hard. I just recall doing it for the longest time. I don't know if I did them all, but I know I did a lot of them. I remember that, and I loved every minute. That was my favorite job. Give it to me anytime.
So now the magazine is done. Everything's written. Everything's pasted up on these art boards. It's all physically packaged up in a box and sent off to the printer.
Okay, but you also forgot the meeting in the art department.
Yes, you're right.
Right. After things were pasted up, we would go and give it a quick look-see. Not even a quick. Take a couple hours and pour over the thing and find errors. And
exactly right. I did forget about that.
Maybe get rid of a photo that was a little blurry or something. Anything that was wrong, we could fix it the last possible second.
Yep. We would all sit around a table.
It wasn't a post-mortem. It was a pre-mortem. I don't know what to call
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like we had a name for it, but
we did. We had a name for those meetings.
But yeah, we would go through everything page by page. Yeah. And
you get some editorial. Oh, I really like this photo, or I like this layout, or boy, this was a great article, or what's this picture of Terry Taylor doing? That's not Terry Taylor. That's, it's Precious.
Right.
Whatever it was, whatever the error was, we could catch it.
Yeah. It was far from a rubber stamping, as I recall. There was always stuff.
There was more proofing to do. Once that thing went out, right? Now you're saying we're sending it to the printer. Then
This
we
is
get
right
the
before
blue,
we send it to the printer. Yeah.
and then we get blue lines back or blueprints, whatever you'd like to
Yeah,
call them.
yeah, we call them blue lines,
We
and
call them blue lines.
that was basically a version of the magazine that was just printed on thick paper. It was, I guess, it was like in the book industry, it would be a galley, right? A
Yes.
galley
Yes.
proof,
Right.
and it was what we would all look at for final corrections and approval before it goes to press.
That's right. And it smelled like the copy paper you get in school.
Like dittos, yeah. You just
smelled like ditto.
Hold it up.
You'd sniff it up. I love the way it smelled. Yes, it was good. And yes, we would find stuff we could still catch something at that point, right?
That's right.
As I recall.
Yes.
And send a composite page back to them with the corrections on it. So errors were not going to print. That's why we very rarely had big errors in our magazine, because we would catch stuff invariably one way or another.
Or sometimes we'd forget to stick an ad in the box, or they like
sometimes it'd fall off.
Yes, things would fall off in transit, and
because the stuff was rolled. The stuff was rolled onto the pages with a roller.
Yeah,
who did the rolling back there? Somebody was it Ken or somebody? You can hear hear them rolling. It's rolling time.
It was like wallpaper.
So how the stuff would go by. How did we send it to them? Was it courier? Was it?
Yeah, I guess it was
mail. Was it?
No, it wasn't regular mail. It was like a FedEx or UPS sort of.
Yeah. But once in a while, something would fall off. Like you'd get the blue line back without a photo, and the photo was in the package, so they had to fix it. And because they were literal photos, folks.
Or
on
the page would be upside down.
Yes. Or in the case of our friends at Kappa, we'll get into that in a minute.
Right.
Do you know what I'm going to talk about?
I think I do.
Yes, you do.
That's the next step, right?
Yes, right. Well, no, we'll go to this right now. Our good friends at Kappa was one of the first magazines we did with them. And they had taken over production, and we sent them a magazine, and we got the blue lines back, and everything was fine. Everything was wonderful. And we get the magazines back with the proper cover and a previous issue on the inside.
Yes, indeed.
I am literally, folks, pooping my pants. I mean, the women are screaming, get a bucket. I'm going, this can't be happening. So I run to the blue lines. I run to our copy of the blue lines, and they were, yes, thank you. So I run to, it's a 5-bell salute, yeah. So I run to the blue lines, and I go, Stu. I turn to Stu. Who else would you turn to? Look at these blue lines. These are correct. This is what we sent them, and this is what they sent us. Do you remember this?
I don't, but yeah, I don't remember the details of it, but yeah, I remember the vague outline of it.
That was about as bad a moment. And they went on the newsstand. We had gotten the copies back. We were looking at the printed copies when they first came back. That and the fact that the crossword puzzle paper was so weak that the covers were too heavy for them and they were falling apart on the newsstand. There was another wonderful moment in the Kappa transition. I'm not making this up, and I'm not. Listen, I am not blasting Kappa. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know that the word jumbles could take so long, but I'm sorry.
I recall, and it's not telling tales out of school. I mean,
no, it's not.
These stories have been told, and
yeah.
It was a rough transition.
We had a rough transition. They were trying something new.
Well, so Kappa owned the printing presses,
right,
as well as the publishing company, and so the paper was inconsistent at best. And if you look at the paper in, say, Pro Wrestling Illustrated from the Rockville Centre London publishing days, and then compare it with The Wrestler or Inside Wrestling from the first year of the Kappa publishing days, there's a big difference. I'll say diplomatically.
Yes.
But it was not unusual for editors who will not be named on both sides of the fence, whether it was wrestling or boxing, that when we would get our sample copies, and Stu is listening to this and he's sort of cringing and grinding his teeth, but also laughing, I'm sure. It was not unusual when we would get our advanced copies back from the printer for them to be passed around to the editors in the office, who would look at them, flip through them quickly, and literally throw them across the room in disgust. It was a very frustrating time.
Well, They did get the hang of it eventually, I think, didn't they?
Yes, they
They
did.
did.
Yes, they did.
This was growing pains.
It was very much growing pains.
Besides, by the time issue 4 or 5 came out, I was already gone. So it's like, I will say that was a contributing factor to my alacrity in getting the hell out of there. I mean it. I mean, I just found that to be so off the rails bad that I was like, what's next? I was worried. Let's just say I wasn't full of confidence at that point.
Right.
It was kind of daunting.
It was a tough transition. And I remember when we did make the move to Pennsylvania, and I spent almost a year driving from Long Island to Pennsylvania, working Monday through Friday, then driving back to Long Island because we had a 4-year-old daughter, a son who was just born, and my wife at the time was trying to sell a condo that we owned and live, dealing with 2 kids all by herself. And I'm in Pennsylvania working like 16-hour days to keep the lights on and the magazines to make sure we don't miss a deadline, which we never did, and that we weren't going to miss one again, and try and get things up and running. It was a rough year, but there, I would love to get Steve Farhood and Bill Apter together to see what sort of memories they have of that time, because the 3 of us lived in a little house on the new owner's property.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Farhood went?
Farhood, yeah.
I did not know that.
Went for a little while, and the 3 of us lived in a house together, and I'd just love to know what memories they have of it. I just remember a lot of exhaustion and overwork. And
you would figure it'd be almost like a collegiate feel, but it probably wasn't. You're probably all sleeping all the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that'd be rough.
Every once in a while, we would get a phone call from the boss that the shades in the house were uneven. They all had to be exactly even in each window. Like 50% up or all closed or something. So if they were out of sync, we'd hear about it. Make sure the shades were even. That kind of stuff.
So glad I didn't go. Good God. Heck. Holy mackerel.
I will say this. I don't want to, again, like I said, it was growing pains, and I don't want to badmouth Kappa Publishing and I don't want to come across like I'm bad-mouthing Nick Karabatz. May he rest in peace. Right. Also, Mr. Karabatz was, whatever you think about, throwing magazines across the room, he was a very successful businessman, and did an awful lot of charity work in the area. So, my hat's off to him for that.
And I'll say one more thing about the people that I met from there when I was talking to them when they came to Rockville Center to pitch the idea of going there. They were above board honest at everything they were about to do.
Yeah.
They didn't hide anything. They didn't soft soap anything.
Yep.
This is what's going to happen. It was all done in clear language. So if you decided you wanted to come on board, and if you don't, Godspeed. I mean, they were really just really honest. I found that refreshing. I didn't agree. I didn't agree with the way things were going, obviously, but the fact is, it wasn't their fault. They were going to run their business the way they found fit to run their business. It's the way they probably did it, the things that made them successful in the first place.
Exactly. And I have known people through the years who have been through similar situations and were promised X, and they wound up getting Y.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was not the case. I mean, like you said, everything was very honest and above board, and this is where we're going. And, we hope you come along for the ride. I'm wondering, Bob, is there anything, we covered a lot of territory, right? From headlines all the way through to blue lines, all the way through to the printed product. Is there anything of the process that particularly stands out to you, or do you feel like we forgot?
Yes.
Lunchtime.
Rockville Center Diner, baby. I love that place.
That's
what it was called.
True.
RVC Diner was fantastic. Hey, how you doing, Bubby? I was on the Atkins program. He threw hamburgers at me. Hello, how are you? How's it going?
And Ken Morgan every day. It was almost always Ken Morgan right around noon. You'd hear the cry come out from the art department. Lunchtime. Everybody go out to lunch.
I hope if Ken ever hears this, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. He did the funniest thing in the art department when things were getting hairy or crazy. Remember what he used to do?
Circus music.
He had this high-pitched, beautifully tonal version of a calliope that I have ever heard, and it was so loud it would reverberate down the hallways. But no, lunch was a special time
Yes.
at London
Yes, it
Publishing because
was.
we had the Bomb Factory, also known as the Rockville Center Diner or Deli, I guess, right down the
Yep.
street. Right? Who made the black and white cookies?
Oh boy, there was a bakery right across from the Rockville Center train station.
Yeah,
The Front Street Bakery.
Front
To
Street. That's
this
right.
day, as far as I'm concerned, the best black and white cookies you'll find anywhere.
And we
Still
also had
there.
we had Bialystock and Blue,
Bialystock Blue.
the new eatery that had really good food.
Yes, they had pretty good bagels in there, and
Yeah. And what was this? Was that the fancier place? Was Bialystock and Bloom, right? The fancier
yeah,
joint. There was because
there was a
Kerry
good
Von Erich ate there, and Mark Lewin ate there.
there was a
Bill
good
would take the
pizzeria
rest
in
of us out to
town.
lunch. It was a good
Yeah.
pizzeria, right? Not too far. So lunch was very important. It's an important part of all of our days, I believe. And we had some excellent lunches in Rockville Center. Here's
Yes.
all the eateries and diners, and we didn't eat McDonald's a lot. Everybody ate good food for lunch.
Yeah.
There. Back when you can afford a sack lunch. You ever have a sack lunch lately?
I have not had. No, I can't say that I have.
I'm telling you, a full-size submarine sandwich and a bottle of pop will set you back between $15 to $18 these days.
Well, I worked from home for the last 25 years, so
there you go.
Lunch is
rub it
great.
in a little, will you? Jeez.
I know.
Gosh, but no, that's how we put our magazines together, and it was a lot of work, but it really wasn't bad. And I don't know if I can speak for you, Craig, but do you miss it? Because I do. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the laugh. I miss a lot of things about it. I miss the fact that I even ended up at a job like that. It was such a fluky thing for me.
I've been very fortunate in my career that subsequent jobs haven't matched the atmosphere of the magazines, but they've come close in a lot of ways. When we were talking earlier about headline sessions and the idea that everybody, not just the writers, the photographers, whoever else, even boxing department wanted to contribute, whoever was around, there were no bad ideas. It was just a very healthy creative process, and actually a sort of a principle that I've carried through in my career. There's no bad ideas. Put it out there because it may spark a good idea.
Right.
There was just a chemistry among everyone that worked there. I remember, I don't think I mentioned this the last time, but I know Stu would talk about this once in a while. I'd have my desk over here and Stu would have his desk over there. And there would be times where something would be coming up in discussion and we would look at each other and we would just know from a glance that, this is the way it ought to be, or this is what we ought to do for that story. Or there was sort of this unspoken communication that would happen.
Yeah.
And it happened with everyone. And it's very rare to get a group of people in a creative environment working that closely, working on such high volume of work, and really not having a lot of friction among each other. I mean, everybody supported. We talked about this a little bit last time. Everybody supported each other by and large. And somebody has a bad day now and again, but far and away, it was just such a positive working environment.
Yeah. On a personal level, I think the one thing I hope I proved is that I knew my stuff from the first day I walked in the door in terms of wrestling stuff. I thought I really knew my stuff, and I had an opportunity to kind of show it off a little bit. And not that it was egotistical about it. I don't know how to put this, but it made it easier for me because I did have such a background in reading every magazine that ever came out and every TV show even while I was there, I was taking Emmy Yates tapes home and watching them from 6 hours every weekend. I did it every week.
Now, I don't know
I liked the subject matter and the fact that I could be immersed in it. That's rare in life. How often do you get a chance to work on the fringes of something that you're really that big of a fan of?
Now, I don't know that I have an answer to this question for myself, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Okay.
I don't know if you have. Is there anything in your time at the magazines that you really learned or took to heart that carried you in good stead in the years that followed?
Standards. I got a lot of that from you.
Okay.
I've worked for some good editors. You're one of them.
Thank you. I appreciate
There's
that.
a fella named Jim Harris at the Catskill Daily Mail who was one of the most brilliant people I've ever known. Some editors at my second newspaper, the Hudson Register Star, and these people taught me so much. I got into newspaper work on a total. There's another fluke how I even got started in this stuff. I contributed some freelance articles to a newspaper, and they hired me just like that. Didn't even ask what my background was. He said, "You got what it takes. Come on and do it." And I learned on the job at all these places. But at London, you learn how to be succinct. You learn how to prioritize at London. We can work on this A, B, C, D, E, and we'll get it done in this amount of time.
Right.
Yeah, I took that with me every single place I went after that.
Triage.
Even as we moved on to Quark Express and InDesign and all the new word processing programs, that the basic tenets of publishing that I learned, it's all served me in good stead until, like I said, until middle of 2021 when I finally walked away from it. You know, it was my job never changed after London. I was doing the same thing when company after company after company. You know, but GC London and the wrestling magazines were the biggest stepping stone of all that, because I went from small newspapers and agate type to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and it was daunting in terms of I never wrote for a national magazine before PWI ever. You know, all y'all seem to have had freelance opportunities. I was coming from the sticks, you know. I was coming from the Catskill, New York, for God's sake.
You just reminded me of something. I don't know if you were there when we did this, but do you remember that we had a wrestling column in one of the tabloids? I think it was the National Examiner.
Was it the Examiner? Was it the Globe?
I think it was one or the other. The Globe or the Examiner?
I think it was the Globe.
Do you remember that? Did you write any of that? Or
I wrote a lot of it. I hated doing it too. No, because they wanted it in a certain style that we didn't do.
Right.
And I immediately hit a wall. In my mentally, I went, they want what? You know, it had to be an entirely different style. And it still explained to me what they were looking for. And it took me a while to get the gist of it, but I finally did. First few were bad because I was still writing in our style.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing I can do as a writer, is emulate.
Right.
When I joined GC London, I emulated your all style, every style that I read there from reading the magazines for years. Every other magazine I've ever worked at, I figure out what their style was and emulate it. Friggin' tabloid, I couldn't figure out anything about that. It was like, hey, everybody, did you know that, you know, Nick Busick can deadlift 350 pounds? Isn't that something? You know, that's kind of like what they were looking for, you know, and I wasn't used to that.
Very different tone of voice than we had.
Yeah, it had to be more conversational to the nth power, I think. So it was a little daunting. I did write some of them. I don't know if I wrote all of them. I wrote enough of them.
Yeah, boy, I wish I'd like to see some of those columns again.
It was PWI in the Globe. I think it was called the Globe.
Yeah.
One of the, you know, the newsstand checkout books.
The rags, as my mom used to call
them. And I remember Nick Busick going on Georgia TV, and he's holding the collar and going,
really?
Can you believe it? Georgia Wrestling in a national publication, and he's holding the thing up for the fans to see. Yeah, he was excited about it. They all were.
Very cool.
You know, when we wrote about somebody small, yeah, God, that was such a nice feeling. Giving somebody their first press or helping out a league that was kind of not on the skids, just smaller. Mm-hmm. And then they see themselves on a national stage. I think they loved it. They really did.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a nice feeling, you know. And like I said, the introducing features I wrote were one of my favorites. You know, everybody from Dustin Rhodes to Rob Van Dam and Sid Vicious.
Sid Vicious, yeah.
And a lot of people that never went anywhere. One guy did, Brian Donahue, who we published a photo of him holding a football helmet. He's a big former football player.
Okay.
He later became the guy who beat up Alan Coulter on the Letterman show every week.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Do you remember those sketches where I was reading something and this big guy would come out and just beat the living hell out of Alan Coulter? That was Brian Donahue.
I did not know that was Donahue, but that's a great piece of trivia.
Yeah. So, but
I remember the bits on Letterman. Man, that's terrific.
Yes. So here's another guy who got some pub out of me, you know. It was fun. until it wasn't fun. I don't know what to say. When real life got in the way for me personally, or I just still been doing it if they would have had me. I don't know, but real life got in the way. Like I said, I had bought property, couldn't leave. That was it. I beat that drum enough on the podcast. When I started this podcast, my initial podcast is, I'm not going to talk about myself. What am I doing here? I've been talking about myself for 2 episodes here.
Well, why not?
But you know what? I think it's interesting. I would hope that our listeners who are big fans of the magazine would want to know what it's like to sit in that circle, that semicircle with us and come up with headlines for a story and look at the new photographs that we got from Bill Apter and be part of that creative process that everybody wonders how we did all that stuff. You got to remember, too, we were just talking about putting together one magazine. At one point, we were putting together 11 magazines or 12
That's
magazines.
Right. That's right.
It was I think the scientific term is shit ton of magazines we were putting together.
Yes, indeed. And there were different processes, right? So we had our reprint magazines, Wrestling USA. That was a sort of a different process because there was no original writing really in those, except I think, we did the ratings, of course, and a contents page. I mean, you don't even think about that. You actually had to write the contents page.
Yeah.
With the headline and whatever that. So
I don't, you bring up a really good point there. I don't remember writing contents ever.
I remember writing contents pages, and we also, a lot of people don't remember that in addition to wrestling and boxing, for quite a while, we also published detective magazines and Western magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And these were all reprint magazines. And the only thing that needed to be written for it was the contents page. And that was part of my job, was writing the content pages for these. So if you were to go back and find these magazines from 81, 82, and you look at the headlines of the stories, but if you look at the second line under the headline, we call them the underline. If you looked at the underlines and read them vertically on the contents page, you would see messages written like, we talked earlier about Carl Lovick, our chief of production. Carl sucks. Something like that. Just to see if he would catch it, because that was his thing, putting together the old, the stories on film.
Now, as I recall, our contents pages wouldn't just have the title; they'd have a cell line too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what the underline.
Yeah.
Right. Here's let's find one from one of your columns here. Blindsided by Bob Smith. Random ramblings from ringside.
Succinct. I like it.
There you go.
Yeah. How about an article?
Let's see. They're pretty straightforward. The Beverly Brothers on the rebound. How superstardom almost destroyed their careers. A clear case of too much too soon.
Okay.
So, Sting wins the U.S. title. Now Luger will have to wrestle me. Underline, the world champ can't ignore his top contender.
Okay.
Yeah, would give a little bit of...
It adds a little juice to it, sure.
Yeah, a little extra juice. So if you're at the newsstand looking at the contents
page... If I ever wrote
page,
him, I don't remember him. That's one thing that's completely out of my mind. I don't ever remember writing the content. Maybe that was Andy's gig. Remember Andy Rodriguez, folks?
Yeah.
Let's not forget absolutely. Andy and Dave Rosenbaum.
Dave Rosenbaum and Dave Lenker, who came along later.
Yep.
Joe Bua.
John Trotta.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris
Bernucca. Yes.
All compadres of ours.
And Kostya Kennedy.
Kostya Kennedy writing wrestling articles remains one of the biggest mind-blowing things I can remember, because he's now considered one of the best sports writers in the whole world.
That's right.
And a real journalist, and he was writing Road Warrior stories. Amazing.
And Gary Morgenstein, who I replaced as columnist for On the Road, has written several novels, and is an award-winning playwright,
right?
And a hell of a nice guy. And yeah, it was a launching pad for a lot of talented people.
Let me ask you something.
No,
I have. Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you next time. No, yeah, we go. No, let me ask you something. Have you ever considered, be it a biography or a fiction tome, about writing a book? I haven't answered this personally. I can't do it. I have tried. I tried
we
writing a
just
humor book about
right.
bowling once, and I thought it was funny, but I think people would think it was obtuse. So I dropped the idea after a couple of chapters. Have you ever tried? Have you ever considered it?
I have not. Well, I've written a bunch of books, but not really books. Right.
Well,
I've
what
written a
is?
bunch of
Wait a minute. That's like saying it's lunch, but it's
yeah. So it's
it's,
well,
but it's
yeah,
pablum. Well, no, what is it? What?
it's dinner, but it's out of a vending machine
Right.
versus it's
Yeah.
dinner in a nice restaurant. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I I wrote like almost 3 dozen books, a lot of them wrestling biographies.
Really?
Um, yeah.
For who?
For there was a company based out of Philly. I think Chelsea House Publishing was one of them, and you can go to Amazon. Some of them are written under my name.
Right.
Some of them are written under Matt Hunter's name, Matt Brock, Liz Hunter.
Oh
So Matt
yeah,
Hunter.
Matt Hunter.
Um, some are written under the name Kyle Alexander. My son is named Kyle. My daughter is Alexandra, so Kyle
Okay.
Alexander. But those are sort of quickies. They're basically, I mean, they're pretty decent books as far as they go. 68 pages, sold into the middle school library market. But you're talking like,
No, I
Gary
once worked.
Morgenstein writing a novel about, you know, post-apocalyptic world where, the last season of baseball, like a real novel, something like that. I never tried that. I I did play around with some ideas. Actually, when I was at the magazines, I had ideas that I was trying to formulate around what would wrestling be like in the far future. So, zero gravity cage match, what would that be like? So I was playing around with ideas like that, but I always felt like if I was going to write a book, a real book,
Right.
it would be something I would get the idea and I would just have an irresistible urge to have to write it. And I never got that. And
Right.
I've thought of ideas through the years of books that I'd like to write or, but I never got that irresistible urge. And I feel like unless I had that, it wasn't worth just trying to squeeze something out if I didn't have that juice behind it.
All these years later, I've come to the realization that personally I'm a hack, but I don't think that's an insult. I can churn out really quickly reams of really quick readable copy that are succinct. I write great headlines. I write good short pieces. That's what I do. That's what I've
Oh,
done. That's what I did for the last 17 years before
right.
the job I have now. It's like you need something, 45 minutes, I'll give it to you.
I would love to have worked. I would love to have been born, say, 25 years earlier
Right.
and worked in the era of, the real glory days of the pulps, during World War II, the genre fiction, all in color for a dime.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
you drop your dime, you drop your quarter, and you get your Weird Tales magazine or your science fiction or The Shadow, Doc Savage, all that sort of stuff. Or even a little bit later in the 50s, sort of the glory days of genre fiction in the paperback era. I would have loved to have played in those sandboxes, but
Yeah.
eh, born too late for that. So it was pro wrestling.
However, and I was telling Javier Oist this in our last episode. I am very sorry that I took wrestling and I stuck it in a drawer and I ignored it for over 3 decades. I did. I really did. I just stopped cold and never even thought of it. Because now, thanks to the 2 podcasts I've been on, I get letters. Hey, Bob, I remember when you wrote this. I loved it when you wrote that. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Which means, as pulpy as the work you and I have done, it had meaning to a lot of people. They enjoyed it and they were entertained.
Yes,
That's why you do stuff like this.
exactly.
That's the end result. It's the end user, not us. It's the fact that people went out and spent $3.25 for a copy of PWI and read the ratings and read the articles and put the centerfold on the wall if you're a kid.
Yep. And I'm
That
glad.
has value. It has value, and I'm
Absolutely.
proud of that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's actually my answer to the question I asked you a few minutes ago,
Right.
which is what's the thing that you took from the magazines that carried you, that you brought with you the rest of your career?
Right.
And the focus on the end user, the focus on the reader. We always used to say things like, if you have fun writing your story, the person reading the magazine is going to have fun reading it. It's always with the end user in mind. It wasn't, oh, we have to do this to make money. No, it was really, how are we going to please the reader? It was always a very customer first mindset.
Right.
And that's something that I absolutely have taken throughout the rest of my career.
Because, I was that reader growing up. I was a reader as an adult. I was the end user myself. Yep. I knew what I liked. And I knew if I did it well, there's another me out there that felt the same way I did. And there were, thankfully, there were millions of them. And that's a nice feel. I get it so much now. Our last guest, Javier, was like, oh, I got this. He showed me his collection of magazines with me in them. And I'm like, dude, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I never knew, and I should have realized,
I would love for somebody, Taschen, Taschen. Are you familiar with them? The publisher, book publisher?
No.
They do tremendous books on all sorts of subjects. Usually oversized, very art driven, very pop culture driven in a lot of ways. They've done books on circus. They've done Marvel Comics, DC Comics, EC Comics. Boy, they should do something on wrestling magazines, because it is just such a piece of pop culture at a certain time that meant so much to so many people, as you say. I would love to see like a real coffee table book devoted to all this.
I'll take it a step inward. And I've thought of this lately, and I really mean this. I think that Pro Wrestling Illustrated should be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Bill Apter absolutely should.
Mm-hmm. One or the other, or both. I think that we did mean something in this business. I mean, when Bruno Sammartino gave his acceptance speech, what did he talk about? He talked about the magazines and how he would go around the country. Oh, I read about you in the magazine, or he'd go overseas. Oh, we read about you in the magazines. The magazines had a lot of weight in the pre-expansion era.
Yes, they did.
And they were the top way that people got their news and information, and other promoters would lean on them too. So I think the time has come.
It was no joke. We outsold Sports Illustrated on the newsstand.
Yeah.
They had a few more subscribers than we did.
Well, yeah, but no, that's an achievement.
That's no joke.
No, it's not. No, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, I think it's time. No wrestling magazine has been lauded on a national scale before this, and I think our time has come. Not mine, the magazine itself.
Or at least maybe a Dark Side of the Ring episode about it.
What's our Dark Side of the Ring?
Mr. London. All right.
You talked out finally.
On that note,
yes, I think we should wrap it up. So I hope you folks enjoyed our little trip down memory lane, how we put our magazines together. If we were lucky, we'd do it one more time. Imagine it.
Indeed. It was a lot of fun.
Just one. Get the whole crew back together and put one more magazine out. I just think that'd be fun. That'd be fun. Hey, Mr. McIlvaney, you listening?
He's out there somewhere.
Hello. Woo.
There we go.
You just peeked out like crazy, buddy. Here goes our recording. But anyway, This is Craig Peters, a good old friend. And I'm going to say this publicly. We got to get together.
Absolutely.
It's not in a Zoom meeting. Great. We have to do it for real. You'll come back on the show soon if I'm lucky.
Whenever you want. This is so much fun. I love talking about this stuff. Let's get Apter on.
Yes, all three of us should be on at the same time. We can do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
I know he's got the equipment, so we should have a round robin, and he can berate both of us at the same time.
And we can ask him to do impressions of wrestlers doing impressions of wrestlers, doing impressions of Jerry Lewis.
I would just love to hear his Bruno again. That's all, or Jerry Lewis, or Ed Sullivan, or
Joe Franklin.
Folks, Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Craig Peters. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, and see you all on social media.
Yeah, we'll tell you how to you can look for him on Facebook, right? And Twitter.
I am on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, tell people how they can get a hold of you. I should have asked that.
I was actually banned on Twitter for
Good job.
for retweeting something that Mr. Musk tweeted with what I felt was not a particularly nasty comment attached to it, but the moment I hit send, my Twitter account was suspended. I started on Twitter in 2008, but I restarted my account. So don't get scared when you see, 12 followers. I actually have been on Twitter for a long, long, long time. Lohad Dreams, LOHADREAMS is my Twitter handle. Lohad Dreams. Lohad stands for Land of Hope and Dreams, a Bruce Springsteen song. Surprise.
And of course, Facebook as well.
And of course, Facebook, Craig Peters.
Yes. I've kind of jumped back at Facebook. I got a little disillusioned with Twitter. I've got like 12,000 plus Twitter friends, but it's not the same joint anymore. It just isn't. No, you can't find anybody there.
It's a car wreck, and I'm fascinated by car wrecks, so I'm still there. But yeah,
me too. But
it's not what it used to be at all.
What's sad is I've actually met people that I know in real life that are friends now through that, and it ain't the same anymore. It just isn't. Sometimes removing the cages, the bars of the cage is not a good idea. That's all I'll say.
Right? Well, if you've been to the monkey exhibit in the zoo, they throw a lot more than their fruit around. So.
Good one. I'll go for that. Okay.
That's what's going on.
Good analogy. Anyway, folks, Craig Peters, thanks again, buddy.
Bob Smith, thank you, my friend.
So good to have my good friend Craig Peters back on board here to join us for all of this falderall and whimsy. In any event, I hope you're enjoying things here. We'll do our usual sign off. You want to get a hold of us, and please do. It's outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. At Facebook, I'm Robert Smith. Twitter, Bob Smith NYC. Also, our official website, where you can also listen to the show, is outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. We want to thank everybody for the incredible response we've had lately. Also, we have a ton of guests coming up. New ones, old ones, repeat guests, new people. We've got some surprising names that may shock you in the coming weeks and months. We are working really hard to try to make this the best nostalgic wrestling podcast for your podcast dollar. I'm going to leave you with the words of George the Animal Steele, who asked the rhetorical question, why they boo Lou?